Hi, welcome at Octo Talks, the podcast where we talk about the newest, the greatest, and the latest in AI. In this podcast, we will cover multiple innovative topics in the space of AI. And for today, we will talk about platform teams, and I invited Patrick Debois and Robbe Sneyders. Welcome both.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Patrick, you are known as the godfather of DevOps. And Robbe, you're one of my colleagues in the office of the CTO at ML6, and you're currently focused on energy, right, within Gen AI?
On energy and on platforms and ML ops, indeed.
What a coincidence to have you at my table. Patrick, recently you shared a video on a platform topic. You stated that Gen AI deserved a platform team.
Yes, indeed. In DevOps, we've been talking about platform teams for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, Dev and Ops was about working close together. That was one thing. And then as people started scaling this out into more of the application teams or feature teams, those kind of shared components like cloud components kind of landed inside of a platform team. And then we extended also the platform team with developer experience and DevSecOps things. And that's why I think we had now heading into this new world of Gen AI with new technology. And I think the logical state is to put it there and maybe not on the side as we used to do with the ML ops. So, but that's my take.
Yeah. Maybe for the audience as well, we talk about platform teams, but Robbe, what is a platform team exactly?
A platform team is a team that centralizes, let's say, infrastructure or certain capabilities that it then offers as a platform or a product to the rest of the organization, and the rest of the organization can then build on top of that platform. So, for instance, if we go back to MLOps and MLOps platforms, there you could provide an ML pipeline framework, but then the actual use case teams developing certain solutions can implement the pipeline that can run on that platform.
All right. And is that a definition for the more classical MLOps use cases, classical AI, or does it also count for Gen AI?
I think a lot of the concepts are the same. So it's about centralizing certain infrastructure or best practices and scaling it that way across the organization. So you don't need to do everything from scratch in every different department, but that the things that are common, that you centralize those to govern them, to improve on them. So that's a bit the goal that is definitely shared.
All right. And Patrick, I see you nodding, but the question that I have, where do you draw a line of this is common and this is not common to put in a platform team? How should you go with that?
Yeah, so to be clear, I'm not advocating if you're a 5-person shop that you need to have a platform team, right? That does not make sense. New technology is often introduced in a company with a pilot, then it scales out to a few teams who do that. And then, if you have like 10 teams and beyond that, it makes sense to centralize those things. There's like states in between that you can help it maybe with some guilds, with some champions, but kind of bringing this all together in one team and scaling this out across the organization, that's indeed a platform team. And in DevOps world, there's been a book called Team Topologies, and Team Topologies have looked at how platform teams land in there. But the scaling is indeed when multiple teams have the same need of capability. Maybe to build on top of it just being infrastructure, what we learned is that you not just have the infrastructure and it's a common component that you're sharing across all the teams. We've seen that with other teams, like the identity management team is doing this. The mobile team is shared. So it's trickier. I think it's also the fact that people are building on top of this. So it's not just something they use, like identity that they just use, but they build on top of that. And that abstraction layer is super important, that they don't need to know the lower layers. But part of the platform team is delivering the platform, the infrastructure, but also doing the enablement. So in a bigger organization, you have to educate people what are good models to use, how do you do your security, and kind of that enablement is not just providing your infrastructure as a service, but kind of doing a collaboration on top of that as well. So there's multiple layers that a platform team actually does, and the most common is obviously just abstracted away so people don't know it, but it hardly works just by doing that.
All right, and could that also be a use case for feeding innovation, as in like the platform team provide a central platform where the whole company can make use of? Is that the main purpose of such a platform team, to build such a thing, or how do you see that in practice?
I personally see it as when you would scale things out. There's confusion, of course, because we're in this innovation piece, and the pilot team, the first one who builds maybe the infrastructure, the first one who kind of brings in the first use case, that's often seen as the innovation pilot team. But when you scale out, 2 or 3, 4 to 10 teams, then you make the others go faster. But it's less about them and innovating. So it's a little bit further along the maturity curve in a company when you scale this out. But obviously the term platform is overloaded. You have the cloud platform on top of it, you have the application, then you have the business platform. There's platforms on multiple layers, but it's obviously, in my world, let's say DevOps world, it's to build and scale and abstract things away.
All right. Talking about DevOps world, Robbe, you're working at ML6, which is mainly a machine learning world, to say it like that. Is there any difference that we should look into? Any other nuances that you want to bring that you see at the customers that a platform team could bring as value for them?
I think, of course, if you talk about machine learning and about ops, you come to ML ops, where you apply a lot of the practices of DevOps to machine learning. So that's been going on for the last couple of years. So I would say it's quite similar. The ideas are very similar. The challenges, adoption throughout the organization and so on is, I think, for both one of the most difficult parts. There are some differences, like the audience you cater to, for instance. I think, again, with GenAI, it changes. Maybe to pick up on the innovation, I think, especially here, one of the things that a platform can provide is the environment for experimentation, because it's very easy to do with GenAI. You can easily get started, and by providing a safe environment, you can get a bit two benefits. You can support the experimentation, but also make sure that it happens in a correct way.
All right. And so you mentioned that such a platform, and I assume now a GenAI platform, because of the ease of experimenting with it, should cater a different audience than an ML platform. How is that different?
Yeah, so I think there's two differences. If you talk about machine learning, you're talking mostly about data scientists, ML engineers. So we see here that a lot of the model work shifts a bit left. So while on an MLOps platform, you develop models on the platform, with the GenAI platform, you offer models as part of the platform. So I think that's one, which also means that the work on the platform is a lot of integration, a lot of software engineering. And then I think a second one is that it's very close to business and less technical people. So I also think a GenAI platform should cater to less technical people as well. There's a lot of additional constraints with GenAI, like managing and versioning your prompts, your guardrails, and so on. And I don't think it really makes sense to always go through technical people to change those. So I think handing those directly to the business users makes a lot of sense as well. So those are two differences I see, more focus on integration, but also even more involvement of the less technical profiles.
Yeah, Patrick, do you agree with that?
So for me, the ML ops and the data, in many organizations, what I see is that they've become their own silo, right? They provide data, but it's less directly used kind of inside of the production. And from what I've seen, the traditional software development teams, they kind of stayed away from this. Like, oh, we'll hand it over to the data team and we'll just instrument it and it gets there. I think the GenAI is a lot more closer to their realm as being like an integration, an API. They don't need to know the model per se. They're just a lot more consumers of services as they did in other parties, a cloud service or a third-party service. And that's why that part is getting a lot more closer to production and real-time usage. And the business, indeed, that brings it closer to business as more of an after like reporting thing of the analytics or the data. And that's kind of a different shift. So you see the engineers are struggling with the undeterminism, and the data science are struggling with, it needs to be like, production proof. It's not just in a notebook, and kind of those clashes, kind of the interesting transition that we're going through.
All right, and I'm more from let's say, your business audience, I would say, and you're more from the technical side. My assumption would almost be like, in the future, a lot of APIs, a lot of services, ML, GenAI service will be covered, or at least provided with all that in place. How do you see the evolution of such a platform team, GenAI platform team, in the future? What will be their core component for the coming months and years?
Yeah, so I think it's true. There's a lot of things already being offered as part of let's say, LLM APIs. But we do see that it gets a bit complex if people across the organization start using different providers, and you lose a bit your view on what is happening. You lose your ability to manage it. So something that we see is a GenAI gateway or an LLM proxy that is often a central part of the platform, where you centralize the access to different LLMs, and then you can, for instance, choose which models you provide access to for which use cases. You can add certain guardrails, you can add cost controls. So I think that's probably one of the most central parts which will stay relevant, because you need to have a view on what is happening, so you can make sure that things are happening correctly as well, and that you're not taking any risks.
Okay. From my understanding, and is it correct that I compared with more classical API management layer, where you could manage throttling, where you could manage the number of requests per second to a certain API endpoint? Is it that plus all the guardrails and GenAI specific components, or is it still something different there? Patrick?
Well, the API is one thing, and yes, we've had proxies, throttling, translating, routing in between models. Those are typically patterns you see there. But we've also seen guardrails in a way that, like, the web application firewalls were like filtering things that go in and out over the API, and that's kind of what we're now seeing with the guardrails to put that in. And there is a layering in what you can do centrally, and you've mentioned that the reusable components, and in DevOps speak we would say, like, that's a paved road. So the teams can choose and pick from whatever is kind of blessed more by the central team. But they are allowed to go outside if they make like a good use case there as well. But for example, the guardrails, as a central team, you can only set a generic layer of guardrails. You cannot do it on specific parts of a use case. So you do have to provide almost that like core feature, and then you make it self-service for them to add on top of that. And that's a similar thing we've seen with APIs. The gateways have some capability of filtering, but the authorization and access control also needs to be within the team and the business logic to make sure that you're covering the right thing. So that friction between central and decentral is definitely something that it plays with, similar to APIs.
Okay. Robbe, is also something that you experience at your customers, that struggle, let's say, or that balance is there and that needs to be discussed with the right teams, with the right people?
It is there, but I think it's still quite early as well. So I think it's also something that we try to advise on for the future. I think currently it's more about the first steps toward platformization. But I think it's already good to have this in view, to know what's coming. And indeed, I think in the end, you want to move a lot of management to self-service, but at the start, I think there's a lot of benefit to centralizing the knowledge as well, and to make sure that you learn from every experiment.
Okay, and from that angle, let's assume I have, or our listeners have, a ML team already. What should they do now? Spin up a GenAI platform team, or allow the ML platform team to evolve to the GenAI platform team? What should they do today?
I think there's some things need to be shared, because again, a lot of challenges will be shared, which are often not related to the capabilities that you want to provide, but more to adoption or the very general constraints like security and so on. So I think there's a reason there to be connected. What we have seen is that the features or the capabilities offered for more traditional machine learning and GenAI are quite different. So I do think you can have different sub-teams because, again, there's enough split there to specialize, but an overarching team that lets you benefit from each other's knowledge as well.
Okay.
But I think it boils a little bit down to where's your weight, right? If your weight is really in the data, it makes sense to kind of extend with the MLOps team. If you have data, but it's not specifically that you have your own models, then you can probably bring this closer to your CloudOps team and your developer experience team to bring it there. I would say kind of the ratio, if I were to pick a team, it would be in the Gen AI space, like 30% of machine learning and 70% of generic coding layer. And that's different from the ML ops, where you definitely want to go like a lot higher on the data layer. But it seems a lot of people can get a lot of benefit without currently playing in the data layer as well. So, but it depends, like how centric, maybe what is your product on where you play this at. But yeah, don't be afraid to bring in traditional software developers because or security people, because they've had this running for a long time in production, and they bring different kind of expertise to the table.
Maybe to
you don't have to agree with me, but
no, I agree, but I think it's important that you mentioned 30% of machine learning as well, because I do think that machine learning engineers or data scientists can still play a big role, because even if the work is a lot of integration, we have seen that it is very difficult to get good results. So there's still a lot of work in experimentation, evaluation, and tuning of the system to get those results. And that's something that's closer to the skill set of those roles. So it is a lot of integration, but it's not just connecting APIs. There's still an experimentation aspect to it as well.
All right. And if you state experimentation, then I already think about governance of such a platform team and the platform itself that they build. How does that work? Is it then on a monthly basis they review all the incoming use cases? How do they actually know? How do they work with the business teams, allow me to call it like that, on what they should build, on what they should provide? Because, Patrick, you mentioned before, they can provide a generic layer, but at some point they need to provide something more specific, or how do they collaborate in that moment?
Yeah, so it's a journey we've been on, with the extension of DevSecOps. Like it's not like an ivory tower that says you shall not pass, and this is the only way we do things. So they learn that they have to go into the teams and listen to the kind of the needs they have, right? But the governance could be simple sometimes on, do we cover the right license? Have we made sure that we had like opt-outs everywhere? A generic education of people copy and pasting things into ChatGPT, right? All those things are all like valuable. Yeah. And then there's obviously on the data itself, there's governance, what goes in and what goes out, those things as well. But there's generic layers, which model they can use. And educate them on this, because they're not used to this, they don't know what to pick, and that's kind of the enablement that those teams have a lot of experience with.
Yeah, indeed. And ideally, it's the as you mentioned, the paved road, the easy way to do things, because otherwise it will be hard if you tell them what to do, right? But if you make the right way, the easy way, then I think you're closest to achieving your goals.
All right. Playing devil's advocate here. Let's say I have a brilliant idea right now. I don't have any use case in my company. Why should I start with a platform team if I can deliver directly my use case, prove value to the business? I don't need the platform team as a business. Why would you introduce it then?
Yeah, but you don't need it if you're talking about a single use case. I think that's always a starting point, solving a first use case. I think you mentioned it before as well. And then when you want to scale it, then you look at a platform team as a possibility. But if you're talking about a single use case or for smaller companies, then it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you ask about devil's advocate, right? We all know like premature optimization is the root of all evil, right? So that's what you don't have to do. Like focus on your business case, the value. And then when scaling things out, then you will feel the pain if you don't have enough resources, the decisions are delayed. Then you're thinking, okay, let me kind of put this more central. But on the flip side, your governance makes sense to do this from the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. Because having that oversight, especially in your first cases where you're experimenting, that makes sense. But you don't have to build the whole infra on top of that already.
All right. I think we covered quite some topics already. We discussed like you have a GenAI platform team. There is a difference with the ML platform team. Robbe also mentioned that we need different skills. Some of them are the same, but some of them are different. Governance is another topic that we definitely need to cover as well. Do we have covered everything then, if we want to spin up a GenAI platform team then tomorrow?
There's a lot of talk about a platform team behaving like a product. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of going into teams and helping the teams find their business use case. And another part they can help in is if you have a product and you want to have your product consistently use AI, use the same colors, use the same icons, kind of have the flow across the product. Mm-hmm. That's not typically thought of in a platform team. It might be in your experience team, sometimes that's called. But initially, that kind of same group of, when it's smaller, they kind of bring that value to the table as well. Mm-hmm. And they go into the product owners, they talk to them and kind of cross-pollinate this across, the whole company to bring that in. So that's another part you can bring in. It doesn't have to be infra, it could be inspiration there as well to scale out.
Okay, so I could say that there's also some kind of change component in there because you go to teams who don't know anything about the GenAI platform, nor the meaning of it, nor the value of it. So would it then also be value talking about skills again, to have such skills as well in that platform team then? Or should we keep it purely technical?
I have my opinion, but go ahead.
I think it definitely makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's with just a technical product or platform, you won't achieve any success. It's again, I think the hardest part is making sure that it's being used. Mm-hmm. So you need a lot of those skills, and I think collaboration is a big one there. Also, again, talking about when you need to take certain steps, I think starting in a collaboration mode on the first use cases so that you see it from close by, that you learn from it. I think that's a good way to tackle it. And then you need those skills as well to collaborate, to actually think about the use cases and not just about infrastructure.
All right, cool. Guys, maybe as a next section, I brought a few statements, or at least few, we call it this or that, right? We talked a lot about use cases. You can build a platform team, but the question that I would have is, do you need to build it or can you buy it? And what should we do, Patrick?
A platform team you need to build. You cannot buy. Mm-hmm. But a platform you can buy.
And what should we do?
Start with your team right now.
Okay. Yeah. Agree or disagree, Robbe?
I would say build, again, in the cases that we discussed. There is a lot of new companies coming up that provide AI platforms, but they're still very new, and I think it's a bit risky to put all your eggs in one basket. So especially the central part, again, referring a bit to the GenAI gateway, I would say, I think that's something to build custom. Of course, you have all these higher level requirements, like things like prompt management, like a playground and so on. I don't think you need to develop or build those yourself. So I would say the central parts you build, but for especially higher level functionalities, I would buy or look at the available open source options.
All right. Platform team is there to enable or to provide self-service tools and functionality?
If I could pick one, I'd start with enable. Because eventually enablement leads to self-service.
Amen to that, right,
yeah.
Robbe?
No, I agree. The only thing here is I think GenAI does provide additional opportunity for self-service because it's easier, less technical at some parts of the use cases. So I do think you start with enabling, but you might be able to go even further in self-service than you could with the previous ways of technology.
All right, and once we are there at the full service, self-service, sorry, then we are full circle, right? So then if we can provide a self-service, the business teams can actually start implementing their use cases on the central platform that is foreseen to actually provide the right infrastructure, the right platform, but also the right skills, I heard, to actually enable Gen AI use cases. That's right, eh?
Correct.
All right. So let's say tomorrow we have our ambitious plan of Gen AI use cases, and tomorrow I start building the vision of a platform team. Can I be ready, let's say, in a few months, or is it like an adventure to Mordor, you mentioned, of multiple years? When can I have like a substantial platform team?
I think it depends on your overall company's maturity.
Mm-hmm.
If you already have established practices like building platforms for your cloud security or your ML, you can build easily on top of that, right?
Mm.
But people have to learn the new topics, the new skills, for sure. But that would be more around like, a couple of months to get them oriented and get them kind of valuable in there. So it doesn't need to take like years. But if you have none of it already, well, good luck.
Robbe, how do you experience that with your customers?
Yeah, I think it indeed can go quickly if the right basics. But if you look at data platforms, which started years ago, it's not like they're finished and they're just up and running. It's continuous development. It's a road that you're going on for a couple of years, at least, I think. So it's about different phases as well. What do you need in the beginning? What do you need later on? And I think it can be good to have a picture at a high level of where you're going, but then take a use case-based approach there and only look at the use cases that you're building, what is needed, and that way create a roadmap and make sure that you have different stages where your platform starts providing value already from early on.
All right. I think that's wonderful to wrap up, because I learned that the platform team is like a key enabler to deliver value in Gen AI use cases, right? So with that, I would like to thank you both, Patrick, Robbe, to be here, and hopefully see you very soon on any new talks, Patrick, or any amazing project that you're doing, Robbe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thanks.
you.